In the corner, the production assistant held a fresh cinnamon roll in one hand and thumbed through her phone in the other. There was a ghost hunting show to sabotage, UFOs over Uluru to explain, and a vanishing, though thankfully uninhabited, island to conceal. The production assistant licked the sugary thumbprint from her phone screen and resumed controlling the narrative of the world. I'm struggling today, folks. I don't know what it is, but today I can't find my ass with both hands. But that's alright. We're going to get through it together on the recap show. 2019, week 31 on SCP Cafe. I'm your host, Blue Soul, SCP Wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog petter, cologne aficionado, Tottenham Hotspur supporter, dumb guy. Dumb. Like, I don't know. It's a struggle today. I think a lot of the struggle was in trying to figure out one of the two, count 'em, skips that got posted in week 31, and I'm looking at this son of a bitch. I had to have read this thing 8 times, 9 times, and it's like, I don't know, a couple more words would sink in, and a couple more. So you mean these words are in English? Okay, got it. Slow going. And it's all right. It's on me. Everybody else is in the comments like, oh yeah, it's a really deep allegory for the Cold War. I'm like, fucking what? But they're right. It is. I got there. It just took longer than I'd care to admit. So we'll get there. We'll talk about both the SCPs that got posted this week. Really weird. I mean, if you're a long-time listener, you know the average number of skips posted in a week is about 15. And 2 weeks ago, we had, I think, 7. Last week, we had like 6. This week, we have 2. Now, next week, we're in better shape because people are doing this funny thing where they've been holding out on me and you, listener, by waiting to post their articles on the first of the month so as to improve their chances on showing up in the top-rated SCPs of the month, at least for a couple of days until, you know, things sort of balance out. The thing with that is it's, you know, people were talking about doing this by like the 18th, the 20th, like, come on, man. 90% of those votes are in the first 2 days. And this is actually getting to be enough of a thing, of a concern, that staff is looking at like ways we can sort of ameliorate this. The obvious one would be to change top-rated articles from just things posted in a calendar month to like a rolling 30-day thing. I'm curious what people think about that. It's, you know, this is obviously something more important to others than to me because I couldn't tell you what SCP was the highest rated in any given month, and I've read all of them for the last 7 and counting. So, I don't know. It is something that I think is going to have to be addressed, and it's weird. I know a lot of people don't do it, but a few people do, and it makes for a lot of reading all at once. Things get lost in the shuffle. God forbid you've got a new writer that wants to, you know, post their first article, and it happens to get posted on the first, and you've got all of these vets trying to, you know, hold out to make best of August and post their stuff on the first, and this poor new guy has no idea why they're getting buried and generally not seen. It's not really good. It has a lot of issues that I think we're going to have to really address. We obviously have the 5,000 contest coming up at some point. Don't ask me. I don't have anything for you yet. But, you know, there's going to be times where we have that feast or famine thing where it makes perfect sense. But for something as silly as, you know, having something on the best of the month thing for a couple of days when, you went out of your way to sort of game the system to do it, then I don't know, that seems like a tainted sort of victory. But what do I know? I've written like one piece in 4 years. So anyway, we have 5 articles that we're going to discuss, although we only had the 2 skips. We're going to talk about 3 tales as well. And before we get into that, I wanted to really thank I want to thank a lot of people, because all this week we've been charting in a bunch of countries. The U.S. charts is something new to me and not something that happens all that often. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times in the last year. So I was charting pretty damn well in the U.S. literature charts. Over on Spotify, we hit a couple of milestones this week. 1,000 followers and 25,000 plays. Those are both really big milestones, and I thank you guys a lot. Just seeing those numbers go up, just knowing this following's getting bigger and bigger is really cool, and appreciate you guys sticking it out with me. On the bonus content side, I will be releasing the CollabCon deep dive, as it were, in 2 parts. The first one will go over all of the entries outside of the top 3 finalists. That will go out Tuesday to patrons, and the part 2 with the top 3 deeper, probably a recap length show on those 6 articles, will be, with any luck, on Thursday. I'm going to do my very best to get both of those knocked out over the weekend and have those ready to go in time. So on the Patreon front as well, if you are or have been a patron, keep an eye on your mailbox. I'm going to be sending some stuff out to all patrons of $1 or more that had or have an address on file. This is by way of apology. I had been meaning to do a couple of more selective giveaways, and I did not. So this is, let's call it some atonement. I want to make things right, and I'm going to do that by sending everybody a little care package. Doesn't matter whether you're here in the States, whether you're one of our patrons in Germany or Australia. Keep an eye on your mail. I'm going to get some stuff out to you. I am planning on getting back into the giveaway mode this month. I'm going to be trying to come up with some new designs and generally getting back into the swing of things. So patrons do get 1 week early access to all bonus content, as well as the ability to ask questions in the cafe mailbox, which we do have some questions this week, and a bunch of other things. If you take a look at patreon.com/scpcafe, you can see all of the stuff on offer. There are some little care packages that go out at $25 and $50 with no minimum number of months. I've seen that in a couple of other podcasts where it's like, we'll send you this, that, and the other at, if you're in this tier, but you got to be there for 4 months. Until somebody proves to me that that's a bad idea not to do it, I'm not going to do it. So, just a one-time contribution up there does qualify you for the little care package that goes out. A couple decals, ID card, pins, shirts, all of that stuff is available. So let's get into it. Like I said, a very slow week. So we're going to get started with SCP-4236. This is titled, "It's the End of the World and Everyone Feels Fine." This is a first-timer piece by Lego Trekker. So this piece on a busier week would have been in contention for Long Boy of the Week, but we're going to make it work because we don't have a whole hell of a lot to talk about, and I'm not going to do that to this piece. So we have an image front and center. This is using a black highlighter that is a black and white photo of a file room with tall ceilings and a guy on a ladder with some boxes on the ladder, getting them, presumably putting them back. And the caption here says that it's a photograph of a previously used storage facility for paper instances of SCP-4236. You have an object class of Keter, and it is level 2 classified with a threat level of green. So we have a little dichotomy here between the Keter object class and the green threat level that set some expectations, things that we need the article now to sort of do to justify. The procedures indicate that newly discovered instances of the skip are to be secured as soon as possible. We could probably assume that. Instances are to be submitted for review before digitization and then secured in standard document storage. And additionally, any civilians with direct exposure to unedited instances of the skip are to be interviewed and Class A amnestized. Agents are working with social media platforms to remove any pre-review instances of the skip. Instances that contain classified info, technical documents, or audiovisual material of famous individuals are the highest priority. And a smaller number of instances which contain classified or technical info may be edited and republished onto online conspiracy theory communities as part of an ongoing disinformation campaign. So this makes it's sort of telling you how the Foundation's operating in this piece, that they are engaging in sort of marginalizing whatever this thing is. They're letting it be edited and then published, but on conspiracy theory communities, so as to discredit whatever the nature of this thing actually is. And should we go a year with no new instances of 4236, we are to submit it for reclassification to neutralized. So those are the procedures, and they do a good job of setting stakes and setting expectations for us to try and account for later. So the 4236 designation refers to anomalous physical and digital media that's been primarily recovered from secure military and government facilities among non-anomalous materials. I feel like this first passage is maybe set up to add some uncertainty. Maybe we have a slightly unreliable narrator here. And starting in the late 80s, instances have begun manifesting in far more unsecured locations. This would sort of correspond with the rise of the internet. And during the 90s, instances became increasingly common online, culminating in a peak of approximately 12,000 new instances being detected and contained during 2015. And the rate of appearances has since been showing a steady decline. We first found out about this via UIU records, which deemed the skip a hoax before instances of it were discovered in secure facilities among classified info. And to date, over 260,000 instances of 4236 have been detected and contained. We initially thought it was memetic, but couldn't find anything along those lines. A more recent hypothesis indicates that 4236 instances are coming from a parallel reality designated -A, and the way we can tell one of these instances from ordinary crap is that it will reference this thing -B, and it won't reference it as such, but you sort of glean that it is referring to this -B via the context of it. So what we know about it is that -B from this parallel reality is an anomalous device of some sort located in secure storage in the Groom Lake Air Force Facility in Nevada within -A, within this parallel reality. Now, Groom Lake Air Force Base is most famously known as the home of Area 51. And that part I don't think is really disputed, but what we're doing here is we're not giving a ton of information about what -B actually is, and it goes on to say the intended effect of -B is unclear, despite instances of 4236 providing significant historical documentation of its construction. So we've got a lot of info on how to build the thing, but no clear indication of what we have actually built when we're done. And there's technical documentation that describes -B in a manner that doesn't seem to coincide with our understanding of particle physics. And in experimenting with the theoretical principles outlined in instances of these documents has met with total failure, suggesting that perhaps physical laws behave differently within this -A alternate reality or alternate universe. And so far, all instances of 4236 have been dated no farther than the date of discovery, meaning that our timeline may be sort of consistent along these two realities. And it appears that the geopolitical history, given the documents that we have found so far, for the most part match up. We have a footnote indicating that there are minor differences, the results of local elections, stock market data, individual dates of birth and death in the public record, and some trends in pop culture, but nothing more serious than that. And that is it. We go to addendums from here, and or addenda, I should say. I told you I was feeling dumb today. So we are, going. We're being pretty intentionally vague as to what this thing is. We're coming right out and telling you we don't know what this thing does. We have a lot of anomalous material describing this thing, and no idea, what the purpose of it actually is. So each of these addenda, it has a numeric suffix. So SCP-4236-00016 is this first addendum, and we can presume that means this was the 16th such document that we were able to store and archive. So we are not going into all of the stuff we've ever captured because, well, there's 260,000 of them? Yeah, we're not doing all that. But this one is titled A Military Engineering Report on the Construction and Activation of 4236-B, and it is within a block quote, a memo from the Office of Lieutenant General Leslie Richard Groves Jr. of the Army Corps of Engineers to the staff of Facility Black Box. Then we have a blacked out date here. And this is, it's discussing Project Silver Gear and what an overwhelming success it is, and that the team down at Black Box have informed me that Gear 3 is operational as of this morning, and already the effects are observable. I've got men in labs telling me that within the next 80 years, we'll be seeing a complete reversal of the expected behavior so long as Gear 3 is left in proper care. And they are going to move this thing to Area 51, and they are basically patting everybody on the back involved in this project, and they note what we've done here may be the greatest accomplishment in human history. Despite the knowledge that the general public may never know what we've done here, I want you to all know that I could not be more proud of you and your service to this great nation. Gear 1 and Gear 2 really brought us all down, but we worked through it and proved that nothing is impossible for the greatest minds in science and engineering Americans have to offer. And we have a picture below that of Lieutenant General Groves. Now, Leslie Groves was a real lieutenant general. He was very heavily involved in the Manhattan Project, which of course was, America's arms race, going into World War II, and he was in and around all of that stuff from, I think he was in the Army as early as like the World War I, just after, and stayed until after World War II, so saw a lot of stuff and was in the Army Corps. So this has a fair bit of historical accuracy to it, so we can assume that this is in reference to the thing, that Gear 3 is actually our device, and we still don't really know what we're talking about here, because it says the effects are observable and we'll be seeing a complete reversal of expected behavior. Expected behavior of what? Of everything? Of anything? It's not clear. And so we'll go on to the next addendum, and this is from 1988, an article from the New York Times, though, of course, in this alternate reality. And this says, declassified documents reveal military science experiment. And so this is done, from the basis of a New York Times article from the late 80s, talking about how the Pentagon declassified a lot of documents relating to research conducted by the Army Corps, and one item made quite a stir, dubbed Silver Gear by the Army. This project apparently resulted in the creation of a device known as Gear 3. It is described as a device that passively alters certain fundamental processes of space-time as described by Einstein. So there we have it. We finally know at some level what the thing is. Now, it's still not all that clear because it just says certain processes of space-time. fucking how many processes are there? How finally can we slice this? So we go on. The Pentagon confirms the device is still functional and is currently located in a secure facility. And scientists suggest the device is almost miraculous in nature if it performs as described. And there's a quote here from a retired Army Corps researcher speaking on condition of anonymity, and he explains a little bit. Gear 3, at least in theory, affects the expansion of space within our reality. Although we can't yet see the effects because of the cosmological horizon, the energy produced by Gear 3 is expected to be causing the expansion of space to slow and eventually reverse. Eventually, we may see the effects of this on Earth as certain processes associated with entropy no longer behave as expected. I can't express how happy I am, and I expect many others associated with the project are for the general public to be able to read and hopefully gain inspiration from our accomplishments. So, to my, I didn't finish college, but this doesn't sound good. This doesn't sound like something that we should be all that happy about. This, as described, will eventually cause the reversal of the expansion of space. We are looking at what we call the big crunch, and perhaps we're doing this on purpose. That doesn't sound great. What problem did we actually solve with this? We don't explain answers to any of those questions. So this was in 88. Our next addendum is from 2013 in an interview with Barack Obama and Charlie Rose on PBS. And there's a 1 minute, 25-second section of the interview, and it's the only material not present in other recordings of the same broadcast. I guess everything else was side by side in our reality. But Charlie Rose asks about this thing. In 08, during the, on the campaign trail, Obama promised that in addition to fighting climate change, the administration would, quote, take a look at this device in Nevada and give the American people a definitive answer about whether we're going to keep it running or not. And since then, this is 5 years later, your administration has been silent on the matter. And in the last several months, there have been some isolated protests here in Washington with fringe groups claiming you're ignoring the most important issue. And the dialogue from Obama's perspective is dead on. I watched a lot of the guy, and I gotta say, the tone here is nailed, and I don't think I can really do this justice. I always encourage people, when there is good dialogue, to go read the article, and this is one of those instances. And the gist of it is Obama more or less sidesteps the issue, says there is no single most important issue to America today, and it's our responsibility as Americans to face the issues that affect all of us head on every day. And that's what the administration's trying to do. And we can't pick out issues that only some people find important and decide to address them before the concerns of everybody else. And basically says, we're not ignoring it. We have people looking into it, what it is and what it means. But it's not what our focus is when it comes to communicating our plans right now as an administration. And I would ask for these protesters to speak their mind and tell us what they consider important while being respectful and patient. And so we go from this to, this is addendum 4. This is where we close the article out. This is item 327464. So the hits keep coming. And this is a journal entry. And this is an unknown author. There's no date on this. And what we have is basically a burnt out activist. They are being, sort of mocked by their own family and generally surrounded by people that don't take the issue as seriously as they do. And this ended up with this person getting kicked out of their own parents' home during Thanksgiving dinner. This guy's wondering how the fuck, he's supposed to function and pretend that the end of the world is okay, and nobody around him even has a coherent answer as to why they don't care. Mom told me she has faith and tried to get me back into the church, Dad just gave me that disappointed look. And Tom tries to talk to me about how we don't know what'll actually happen. And, said, I feel like I'm in a nightmare. Any moment, I have to wake up and my entire existence since after I heard about the damn thing is going to turn out to have been a real shitty dream. A new disaster movie comes out every 2 years. Everybody acts like it's so thrilling and exciting and frightening, while we all sit on the actual end of the world. And meanwhile, it's already doing its job. Who knows how many beings, how many civilizations it's already destroyed. Maybe every second I sit here in front of this paper, instead of out there at that fence with a fucking gun, I'm dooming millions of sapient beings. So they feel very keenly the consequences of this device. That it is, as described, going to be the certain end of humanity and the certain end, more or less, of this reality. And this journal basically ends with him sort of losing the will to fight. It doesn't really matter anymore anyway. The hype is gone. The movement is over. There's maybe a third of us coming to the meetings anymore. Kelly tries, but when she stands in front of the podium and makes that same speech every night, you can see it in her face that she doesn't really believe we're going to be able to do anything anymore. By this time next year, we'll be completely out of the news cycle. We haven't even gotten a question asked about us on the primary stage. I think I'm going to go home. I just want to feel happy again. Wouldn't it at least be better just to feel happy? And we end the article there. Like I said, I struggled with this piece. I don't know what the hell it was. It's entirely on me. When I talk about it in the way that I just did, it's all really clear. But just trying to read this thing, I don't know. It felt like a slog, but when you talk about it and try to analyze it, it's not. It's really engaging, and what you have is an allegory for any number of things. You can talk about, the growing concerns of climate change, of the nuclear arms race and nuclear proliferation, really anything where, you see a constant raising of stakes out in the world with dire consequences, and nobody around you seems to give a shit. And you can only keep that fire going for so long while the people are in power, the people, that have the ability to do it, either divert it, subvert it, or flat out ignore it. And that is a powerful thing to explore in a work like this. Now, my one core thing here that I could see some people not being happy with is that the Foundation is playing a part in this. And for the most part, there are more articles out there that portrays the Foundation as protagonists than antagonists. And there's also this consideration that basically we spend a lot of time, these documents are the skip rather than this -B, this device. Now, we don't make any effort at all to determine, can we deal with this -B? Can we do anything? Do we have some obligation to what appears to be this parallel reality? There are definitely certain canons and takes on the Foundation where absolutely, we do have the obligation to, try to figure out what's going on in this other reality. So it is, there's an element here that is played really well, where even though we're hearing the story, we can't do anything about it in this context. This is really well put together. For a first-timer piece, it's outstanding. The dialogue in it is really, really solid. There's a lot of little details in here that I think, bear reading and rereading. And I'm not just saying that because I had to read this thing as many times as I did for it to click. I think there's just a lot of beautiful detail in this piece. This is a very, very strong +1 from me. Moving on, we have a series to rewrite. This is SCP-1204, The Social Disease. This was originally by Famine Pulse And rewritten this week by Roger. We have an object class of Euclid and an image of what looks to be brain scans on a couple of displays with a guy in front looking at them. And the caption says, Dr. Mayredder studying SCP-1204. And one paragraph worth of procedures. Deceased specimens are stored within Site 77. SCP-1204 does not survive in captivity or any other domestic environment. Any instances identified in the wild are to be observed by mobile research teams and facilitated by Pi 1 City Slickers. Ethics Committee guidelines suggest that any SCP-1204 hosts should be euthanized after conducting relevant research. That's ominous. And monitoring of municipal government records has been discontinued as it is ineffective in locating specimens. So 1204 is described as a human being which hosts a parasitic, semi-corporeal being of unknown composition. The actual assignment of the number here is a little weird, that we're talking about the human carrier of the thing rather than the thing itself. Roger did clarify this in the comments that it was just, he tried it both ways with doing like a -1 for the human and, the 1204 just being the parasite, and it looked too confusing. And I could see that because the talk goes back and forth between the human and, the host and the parasite pretty rapidly throughout this piece. So, bear with it in this skip. The 1204 refers to the human rather than the parasite, and there is no -1, -a, anything in this. It is only 1204, the human, that happens to have the parasite. So we describe that CT scans of these hosts reveal a tumor-like mass of varying size and location within the brain, but autopsies have shown the parasite is invisible, detectable only through electrical pulses made upon contact, and it spreads via oral contact between two humans. A contracting mass of pharynx tissue will elongate through the mouth of an infested subject and into the uninfected oral cavity. Gross. This process requires extended oral contact. What follows has not been studied enough to conclusively document, but it is known that both subjects will be carriers afterward. All known specimens have been transient or homeless persons, believed to have been suffering from various debilitating conditions prior to infection, and we do not know if this made them predisposed to infection or if it's more reflective of the general health of the homeless or transient population. And the behavior and personality of the host changes markedly after infection. They become very hypersocial. They devote lots of time to seeking out physical contact. They experience strong feelings of loneliness, as well as extreme idolization of one potential romantic partner, and sexual interaction occurs only incidentally. So we're walking a tightrope here of crazy to death, but it's on the okay side of it, because we can kind of see how this is going to go, and the addendum does kind of bear that out. But if you think you know kind of where this is going, you're probably right. The physical symptoms of subjects now, and see, this is sort of a kludgy sentence that happens when the designation is unclear, because it says physical symptoms of subjects with long-term SCP-1204. I feel like this needs, physical symptoms of SCP-1204 carriers. I don't know. I don't know what the right verbiage is here, but I don't think this is the right verbiage. In any event, long-term carriers of this parasite will suffer from persistent internal bleeding, memory alterations, and small but inevitable fatal this is one of these. It says TEARS. It's like fatal tears? No, fatal tears near the rear of the nasal cavity and ventral portions of the brain. The but inevitable feels like a little bit of shaky tone, especially since we say that we don't sort of qualify it's fatal, not that so inevitable in that instance is probably a redundant word. So it then says this suggests a toe on brain issue during migration, TOW. I don't know what that means, but I'm not a med school kind of guy. Brains are gross and weird. Reasons behind the lethality of SCP-1204 are not yet known. Again, this attribution is just really sort of messing with the feel of the piece and how you explain these things. It goes on to say that physical degradation does not correspond with the parasite's physical bodily interactions, and post-mortem examinations revealed the absence of a hippocampus, and some evidence exists to show that 1204 subjects may recall experiences and muscle memories of previous hosts, but this has not been confirmed. We don't actually follow up on that in this work. And upon nearing expiration, the infected human will cease seeking out further hosts for infection and will attempt to locate an uninhabited, we'll try that again, structure or region, and once alone, it will find a small place to expire inside of, and once that occurs, the remains rapidly decompose until skeletal, and scavengers will not feed on these remains, and we use that as a tell for 1204 infection. We discovered this skip via an unusual string of murder and suicide reports, ranging from Palm Harbor, Florida to Clarksville, Tennessee, and this took place over about 10 years and involved 3 black boxes worth of individuals before the Foundation detected and recovered SCP-1204. So the origin has yet to be discovered due to a lack of public record regarding the victims. So the only addendum in here is a journal entry of 1204-45. I lied, there is one dash in here, and this is our only known first-person primary source detailing its effect on mental faculties. It is cataloged within Site 77, and the document was originally written on a variety of surfaces, including toilet tissue, strips of cardboard, and Bible pages. So this is a fairly standard crazy to death log. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, and they go more and more off the rails. There are some good creepy lines in here. It starts out very, very straightforward, very, easy to read. And we have, in the second one, we see what is probably some influence from this parasite. I just feel like when we're hugging and stuff that I want to be closer, like I can't be any more close to you than possible. It's like, I don't know. Sorry, it's such a weird feeling. Like when we're laying down together, like I just want to, I don't know, like be you for just a second. Hope that doesn't sound too creepy. I love you. Can't wait to smell you again. There is, in this third log, it ends with how sweet are the sounds of lips pressed together, bumping gums and grinders. And we have a footnote here saying there was indentation, but it was erased by the writer. I'm not actually sure what that means. And this last entry is fuck you a number of times. Let me the fuck out, you stupid pigs. You want to keep the lips for yourself? You stupid, you jealous scunner. That's why you have me locked in here, because you want him all to yourself. This is all part of your stupid plan, dumb hole. I didn't even care. I'll put you in a bone orchard. Convict me. You just put me in here so you could have them throw my guts out. Let me inside. I want you. I don't want me. I don't want me. It says I can be with you. If I can get to you, we can both be with you when I get to you. It's good and weird. And we did not recover this person. We found these journal entries. Pi 1 did. In an abandoned house during recon operations. DNA was lifted from the documents, but they did not match any 1204 remains to date, and we end the article there. So this has a reasonably good, actually Series 2 sort of feel. The focus is strongly on the horror element of it. We don't spend a lot of time dealing with first causes. We spend a lot of time in the description of how this thing operates as far as from the craziness factor and the body horror factor. So for what it is, a Series 2 rewrite, I think that's pretty solid. The designation of 1204 as the human lets this piece down in a couple of places, and I don't know what the right answer is. I could totally see making -1 in here as often as we have to jump back and forth. I think I could see that looking confusing, and perhaps we just need a lot more usage of that, the parasite, the host, because that is, that's still good and scientific. I mean, that is the relationship, and that could work to make this a fair bit clearer, because it does bog down sort of in the middle of this description, because we have to stop and think, oh yeah, so that's the human, so long-term subjects with long-term human. No, that's not right. So long-term SCP-1204 instances with long-term exposure to its parasite. There you go. Stuff like that, I think, would help this piece flow just a little bit better, and that's the sort of stuff that can be done and will, I think, just improve the piece. I want to see that adjusted, I think, before I give this a +1. On a first-time writer, I might give this a +1 as it is, but unfortunately for Roger, Cactus, a couple of the real veterans here, I do hold them to a higher standard, and I want to see a couple of those little things addressed, and then I will be very happy to give this a +1, because I think it does fit that Series 2 look and feel really well. So believe it or not, we just talked about every positively rated skip posted from Thursday to this past Wednesday, and that's weird, but so it is. So we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of tales that were posted this week, and I discussed this in the mailbag last week of how difficult it can be to find tales that really work for Cafe for a recap, because they can't spend a lot, there can't be a lot of assumptions that the reader, the listener in this case, is familiar with the subject matter. I don't know, how much of this background everybody has. For the most part, I don't have it, and I'm the one, trying to read it. So we picked some that don't have any real ties to existing GOIs, to any sort of ongoing story. And we're going to start with one that should be pretty easy to follow. It's called Urine Too Deep, and that is URINE. So this piece starts out with some text messages going back and forth. Are you in your office right now? Yeah, doing paperwork. What's up? Come to the bathrooms in B Wing. What for? Please, bro. Apparently, Junior Researcher Lee enters and says, what the hell, dude? I didn't want to talk to you while you're taking a piss. And Junior Researcher McKinney says, no, don't go. See, that's the problem. What's the problem? When did I send you those 2 texts? Like 2 minutes ago? I've been here that whole time. You mean here peeing? Yeah, and for 2 minutes before then, too. What? How? I don't know, man. That's the problem. Is this an anomaly? Well, it doesn't sound normal. Shit, what do I do? Wait here a minute. So that's how we kick off this tale. I was hooked right here. So Lee comes back. He's got a security officer with him, and the security officer starts questioning the guy, and he has to reply, no, I'm not currently carrying or in possession of any anomalous objects. No, as far as I'm aware, I've not been exposed to any anomalous influences in the course of research or testing. No, I have not had access to any anomalous objects or creatures beyond those specifically assigned to me. Okay, last thing. Where were you, and what were you doing immediately before this began? I was in testing chamber 209, documenting initial assessment on some anomalous object. It's still there. I just left for a second to use the bathrooms. And so we have a break here. It says, stream uninterrupted? This whole time? This guy's fascinated by this. And says, how do you feel? Is there any discomfort? Pressure on your bladder? Are you becoming dehydrated? No, I don't think I am. I feel all right, I guess. Like it doesn't hurt or anything. Subject expresses no symptoms of physical discomfort. I will now collect a material sample for our... No, I'll do that. And takes the cup. And so unfortunately, at this point, we can't say with any certainty the total volume produced. However, given the amount of time this has gone on, it must be in excess of a normal human bladder's capacity, there are almost certainly some fascinating implications to this. And at this point, there's a whole fucking team in this bathroom, and now they're starting to spitball ideas on what the hell's going on. Is it perhaps a mimetic effect manufactured specifically to induce this for some medical reason? What about a localized temporal distension limited to the subject's urinary functions? What about an extremely small portal to another dimension? Now, I'm going to say, I think you missed an opportunity there. You should have had fella chime in. What do you mean extremely small? I think that would have been really good. So there's 4 new researchers crowded in this room, standing near the sinks and each other, all, discussing different ideas on this phenomenon. And McKinney is, they asked, does he need anything? He says, nah, thanks. Actually, I kind of wish I'd chosen a stall now so I could sit down. My feet are killing me. So we'll hang in there, and Lee claps him on the back, which is kind of awkward. And he gets a, whoa. That, all right, sorry, I didn't. Hey, it stopped. There's a pause. What? I'm done. I finished. What do you mean? How? What exactly happened? I don't know. Nothing. It just stopped. Well, wash your hands. End article. I like this as just, it's a little, you could see this being like a 30-minute slice of life. And there's you know what, I'm going to go back, and I skipped over a sentence here outside of the context of dialogue where McKinney says, I don't know, it just stopped. And there's a line here that says, everyone in the room silently contemplated the previous hour spent in the careers they dedicated their lives to. Well, wash your hands. Just this little slice of life of being in the Foundation and random anomalous shit happening, and then it's gone as quick as it came, and we don't know anything really. And this piece doesn't, we're not putting a man on the moon with this piece, but it's thoroughly entertaining. I really enjoyed it, and the dialogue in it's all good. I like the little the text messages back and forth. It's a little, the format's a little strange because they're like rounded squares almost, and they don't always match up with the text itself. That makes it look a little funny. I think if that was fixed, it might look a little better. But that's a very small nitpick. I really dug this. I actually got a good laugh out of it, and this was an easy +1 from me. And before I move on, I realized that I did not give the author credit on this. This is written by Boogeyman23. Moving on, scp-idiots-with-numbers-the-new HR. This is another tale. This is written by Volcano Girls, and this is actually done in the format of a comic. It looks like we've got 9 panels all in all, and it's quite a short read, so I'm just going to read it. This appears to be from the Ethics Committee. Gentleman says, attention everyone, due to budget cuts, the Ethics Committee will now be taking on HR duties. Any questions? And there's a response from the crowd. What are the ethics of having an entire department dedicated to considering humans as resources? And the first person responds, any question from people who are not Carl? And then goes on to say, we're also no longer terminating D-Class. Instead, they will be given amnestic at the end of each month. And some D-Class in the next panel say, wait, you do what to us now? Which is good. And the Ethics Committee goes on to say, it may not be the most ethical option, but at least it's less horrific than the thing we keep in room 23. And a person that is oddly a skeleton asks, what is in room 23? To which Ethics Committee replies, the combination of humanity's greatest fears, unfathomable horror, and clowns. And we have what looks to be Clown Thulu underneath, an eldritch entity with a multicolored afro and pink and blue eyes, asking, what's the difference between a dead baby and a BLT? And we end it there. That's the whole thing. So here's my gripe. The illustration here is beautiful. I really like the facial expressions all through this. This is at a really high level throughout. But we tagged this as a tail and not as artwork. So from my perspective, I have to judge it on its merits as a tail, and this fails the rule of thumb, which is the article needs to be longer than your thumb, if it was done in any other format. So I dig the artwork. I don't have a lot to talk about as a tail if it didn't have the artwork to go with it. This thing would be in serious trouble. This is actually a -1 for me, which I don't do very often, but it's on the basis of what it's been tagged at. So that's what I am, judging it by. With the artwork tag instead of the tail tag, this is a slam dunk +1, but as a tail, and I have to treat it that way, because that's what they chose to tag it as, there's not enough in it. So it is what it is. The thing's doing fine. It's at +28 right now, and it is really, really pretty. But this is one of those things where these little decisions do, have consequences. People will make their decisions on, what you chose to sort of file this under. So, it is what it is. Beautiful artwork, but as a tail, no, it's a -1. Last but not least, we have 7 Lies a Week. This is by IP, and this is a really good tale. This is sort of, it feels like a modern retelling of Black, White, Gray, because we go through 7 days. There's 7 little passages here. Each of them is prefaced by a day. We start with Monday with a news anchor freaking out, going, "What do you mean we're not live? A fucking asteroid's going to hit the Earth. We have an exclusive story and we're not live." And a cameraman goes, "Well, there's something wrong with the cameras and there's no audio feed either." And so she's, "Son of a bitch, those assholes at Fox report on this before we do. Fuck it, I'll go on Twitter. The public needs to know that they're in danger." She opens her phone and her screen is filled with a spiraling, branching fractal that made her very soul hurt. And the cameras came back on just in time to see her in the middle of a heart attack, the story about the asteroid forgotten. And meanwhile, in the corner of the studio, there's an anonymous production assistant checking her phone screen and making her way towards the door. And there's a text message back and forth here. It says, "Anchor cut. Kill agent was a bit extreme." The other party says, "It's filtered. She'll live, probably. Egg crashed in the Pacific. It's expected to drown." And our PA says, "Cool, I'm heading out. Want me to grab some Cinnabon at Times Square?" And the other party says, "Watching my weight. Knock yourself out. Don't forget the gas." And this production assistant tosses an amnestic gas grenade over her shoulder. Upstairs, the station manager, the only other person who knew of this, was tripping out of his mind on bad mescaline. He'd be discredited easily, assuming the windows in his office didn't give. So that's kind of what we got going on here. These are people inserted into important places, controlling what's getting out. And Tuesday is a back and forth between 2 agents. One only recently moved into England, and probably because it's the one place in the world he doesn't have any outstanding warrants. And says, "Back in training, I heard this ludicrous rumor. Apparently all amnestics are is prolonged torture and gaslighting until they admit they didn't see it. It's bloody inelegant, if you ask me." And the reply is, "Nah, everyone gets fed that rumor when they go into cover ops. It's to prepare you for the real fucked up shit we got to do, and amnestics aren't necessarily an option." And this basically what transpires after this is an MP, a member of Parliament, I should say, that apparently looked too closely at the United Kingdom's black budget, and perhaps he was, found out some shit he shouldn't have ever seen. And so we are discrediting this MP by tranquilizing a ram, that is to say a male sheep, and we've got our MP in a duffel bag. We pull his pants down, we take some photos, and we move on to Wednesday. This was a really good passage. I almost made this my opening pull quote here. It says, "Making it so that someone no longer existed was almost depressingly easy in some parts of Asia. all you had to do was click, drag, drop, make a phone call. That person and possibly their entire family would be unpersoned faster than you could say Orwell was right. And Lou had to do this to 6 families in the last hour and has 17 more to go before the end of the day. All of them were exposed to something, she didn't know what beyond It's Anomalous, whose existence made the party very, very unhappy, and an unhappy party means no Foundation collaboration. As it turns out, a sizable proportion of the nation's population is allergic to amnestics, so it would be a waste of resources anyway. Lou would ask for a transfer to another office within a week. Already she'd lasted about a year longer than most cover-ops agents working in this part of the world, and she wasn't sure what that said about her. This is a beautiful passage. I love this entire Wednesday section. In Thursday, we are discussing an incident in the Antarctic, and crazy shit happens down there. The cold, the loneliness, it does really strange things to people. You have this concept of paradoxical undressing. You know, they get frostbite, but you find sunburned corpses because they've taken all their clothes off because they're so fucking hypothermic that their brain starts, short-circuiting. And that was what happened in Dyatlov Pass, which is a creepy fucking Wikipedia read, by the way. Then that is what would be the official line on what happened at the Argentinian research station, and it wouldn't make mention of the esoteric markings covering the building's interior or the blood, and that's really easy to clean up at sub-zero temperatures. It gets to a point where you just peel it off the body in long solid strips. And there's a photographer on the scene. He says, "Documentation's finished. I don't know how hypothermia is going to explain all the bite marks." And the agent says, let's leave that to the people upstairs. He's got a shovel. He's thankful hazmat suits are keeping him warm. "So what kind of ritual is this?" And the photographer goes, "I'm just here to take photos. They'll be transmitted to your tablets within the hour. Until then, do not move the bodies. It could compromise the credibility of the scene." He's making all these wild hand gestures, even as he walks back outside. And the agent says, "Compromise the credibility of the scene? Fucking creeper." And gets back to scraping the bloody circle off the concrete floor. On Friday, a rookie is having a very bad day, as are an entire city block of people who he set on fire, while meaning to only get one room, to which the agent on duty slaps the recruit across the face and says, "Listen to me, everyone on the whole block was as good as dead already." And that's not much consolation to the rookie, who says, "What have I done?" The reply is, "Probably saved the whole city. Once one of those high-stakes route, it spreads far, like real far. I wouldn't be surprised if it had gotten the whole block already." And offers the rookie a cigarette. Says, "You get used to a bit of arson working in this department." The rookie says, "I just took this because I could be closer to home." Takes a cigarette, and he can't light it with his matchbook because he's shaking too hard. And it's the same matchbook he just used to kill at least 400 people. He goes, "Can fire even kill that thing?" The reply is, "Probably. I think you may be up for a commendation on your first assignment, if we can confirm that it's been eradicated." And Saturday has some good quotes as well. It says, "Poacher eaten by lions made for a great news story. It has a nice karmic feel to it. Also, a handy way to dispose of evidence. Regrettably, lions didn't find poachers to be very tantalizing prey. That's why you have to bring in a wood chipper and a couple of sirloin steaks to mix in." And there's a quote. It says, "You sure you got all the bullets out?" Bastard probably already had a few in him when we put him down. I wouldn't worry." "Have you ever seen what a bullet does when it hits a wood chipper?" "Fine, but you're cutting off the head." I like that little interplay. And we get to Sunday, and this is where we see it all come together. The replacement news anchor saying, "Our top story tonight, Argentinian authorities are grappling with a second tragedy this week. In addition to the fire which ravaged several blocks of Buenos Aires, we have reports that several members of an Argentinian science team have died of hypothermia." And in the corner, the same production assistant, holding a cinnamon roll in one hand, thumbing through her phone in the other. A ghost hunting show to sabotage, UFOs over Uluru to explain, and a vanishing, though thankfully uninhabited island to conceal. The production assistant licked the sugary thumbprint from her phone screen and resumed controlling the narrative of the world and article. I dig the hell out of this piece. This is I don't have a whole lot to say. I really, really like it. I like everything about it. And this is probably a lot of the ugly stuff that people don't really talk about, but is closer to reality than a lot of the stuff that we sort of construct in the universe. And for that, it is awesome and a very, very hearty +1. We are just about at the hour mark, and I have a few mailbag questions to get to. AIS Mallard asks, which groups of interest do you think have interesting formats that you would like to see more of? And on a related note, which GOIs do you feel have underexplored narrative potential? So the first one, interesting formats. Two off the top of my head. One is Chicago Spirit. I've liked the stuff I've seen recently. It's got its own really distinct format, and it's really cool. I like, we throw a lot of the tone out the window, and it adds a very unique flavor to the whole thing. I'm also a big Prometheus Labs fan, sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum, as cut and dried as things can, really ever get. And of course, the Shark Punching Center. I'm Pepper's Ghost's interpretation of the SPC, I think, still has a ton of meat on the bones. And when we talk about underexplored narrative potential, really all the GOIs, at the risk of that being a cop-out sort of answer, there's so much that can be done with every one of the GOIs out there that, we've scratched the surface on a lot of them. And I think there's plenty of room to, come up with new, fascinating things just in that GOI arena. And, as it's alluring for people to try and build a new GOI, but I think it's, equally interesting from a reader's perspective, if not more so, when you take something that is already somewhat established and you can put your own stamp on it. You can make it something with new depth and complexity that I think people can really get behind that. And it is, I think, probably the most underexplored area. I mean, you've got GOIs and canons, right? Like, those are the two that you'd have to point to that have a lot of story still left in them. Canons perhaps more so because that lets you build the whole universe, where GOIs, are obviously more limited in scope. But at the same time, I think GOIs, you can mess with their power levels, with their dynamics with other GOIs, their dynamics with the Foundation. And Marshall, Carter, and Dark is a great one there, in different interpretations of our interactions with them, and then their interactions out and about, particularly with other GOIs. There's still a ton of room to maneuver, and I really do encourage people to, give these things a shot, not just with, SCPs, but just building the GOI formats, the tales, the other stuff that helps construct this universe. Mini Meats says, how do you feel about the use of strong POIs to make certain GOIs stand out? Groups like the UIU are faceless government agencies, but things like Sarcasm rely on key figureheads, and I love it. I do think strong POIs are some of the most entertaining things we get out of the wiki, is building up these POIs, and they become the figurehead for the group of interest, and it's something more relatable. You don't just have, well, this GOI is like this other one, but it's different because of these things. It's much more, Dr. Wondertainment, particularly when, Jorik brought out, his take on Wondertainment. It's like, all of a sudden we've got this really strong female lead, as it were, as a POI, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that gives you all sorts of new opportunities, as well as making it feel like a much more interesting group. Before it was like, you could write about Wondertainment just as it's almost like Factory Things, but a little more kid-like. But then Wondertainment became this, we gave it some real character through that strong lead, that strong POI, to front the group. And that is, a few of these, like you said, with the UIU, we don't have somebody to point to. We don't have the puppet master, somebody really pulling the strings. And there's not a ton of stuff out there either. So, there is an opportunity to try it, and I think that can also really change the complexion of the GOI at the same time. When, if what are their motivations? And because their motivations, if they're at the top, become the mission statement for the GOI. If they are, if you think about it in terms almost like of alignments of, if they're chaotic good, you have a Dr. Wondertainment that, has really passionate ideas about doing good, but they do it in ways that fuck up, our expectations of reality, then that's a compelling motivation. And sometimes those sorts of conflicting things, that we're doing things to break the mold and challenge reality, one, because we can, and two, because our leader is passionate about that. I think that can make for really interesting narrative and storytelling. Even in like let's talk about the Shark Punching Center. We have it's silly. It's got a lot of goofy stuff to it. Occasionally been played straight, but we never explored the one thing that I really wanted to see. SPZ-001, the High Pugilord. Who are they? How did they get to that position? What do they want? What? I mean, we probably know what they want. They probably want to punch sharks. Why? How did they come to power? Who granted that? There's so much room in really anything for building up the hierarchy, and that lets you add in power struggles, which Wondertainment, for one, has done really, really well. And that sort of stuff's all really compelling. It's stuff that's relatable. When you add those POIs, you add that human element, you can get much more engaging content out of it than just the faceless chaos insurgency, or, the GOC, in the early days. There were just these, big groups that did a thing because they did the thing because that's what they do. And POIs make all the difference in understanding motivations, and why these GOIs are the way they are. And if you're in the position to write one, you get to sort of tell that story. Why are they the way they are? Well, this POI brings these motivations to the table, and we get to sort of put those into play for the first time. It's a really powerful thing, and there's plenty of GOIs that still have a lot of meat on the bones for constructing that sort of subject matter. So that's something I would definitely encourage. Build these things up. Give the writing community something new to consider. These power struggles, these new POIs. It's there's not a damn thing preventing you from giving it a shot. And worst thing that happens is you get a lot of people thinking about what you're trying. Lastly, Christian Wright says certain errors, tone, style, overplayed tropes, etc., are common in newer or less experienced writers' works. In contrast, what are some of the hallmarks of strong writers on the wiki, and what aspects of their writing can you point to as being indicative of their skill? And this is an interesting question. It's not something I've really thought about in those terms before, but there are certain things you see with how a piece is structured. The containment procedures don't dwell on things that don't get followed up on later. They are there to set expectations for the work. Everything in it is leading to something, and we don't spend too much time anywhere explaining things that don't matter, that don't advance the story, because that's how you end up with a piece that's sort of a slog, and that is normal. And I think, new writers should hear that works do typically start out with more detail than they need, and it gets pared down as you start seeing, how the different elements interplay, and you go, well, okay, so I can remove this because we never really make mention of it, or I can remove this because it's too subtle, and the time would be better spent building up something else in the work. And that, the brevity is really important. One of the things you'll see in new writers and people that have seen a lot of old content is spending a lot of time talking about things like, talking about what happens when the skip, the monster, the misunderstood boy is angered in the rage state. It has this phase and this phase, and you've got to tank them, and it's very obviously like laid out like a fight, like you're playing Containment Breach or something that you're trying to maybe get in the game. And by contrast, when we see really high quality works, they don't spend time boring you with details that are not followed up on in the piece and are really relevant to your comprehension and enjoyment of the work. When we talk about that the humanoid is given access to books and music and so on, we need to justify that in, why is this beneficial to us and them? And, an experienced writer will, give you a compelling reason, and maybe give you, this is a chance to sort of evoke some pathos in, where they're getting these things, and that's a rarity in the Foundation. Whereas an inexperienced piece does that because, well, they want the humanoid to have those things, and that's not sufficient, because we do have this, cold not cruel mindset that I think really does come through in, for the most part, in the experienced writers. I think a lot of them buy into that, and because it makes for interesting writing, it makes for interesting horror writing when you can empathize with the thing being contained. I'll also tend to see experienced, solid writers play more with the core components of a skip in a way that's interesting, in, doing something like redacting containment procedures. Done well, it's sort of like they're setting their own challenge, they're calling their own shot, that they can do this early and still pull it off and give you a reason to go along with it, because the format very much is what it is until you make it a point to say it is what it is, except this time it isn't. And it is something that needs a good understanding of the elements. That's not just reading a lot of articles, that's analyzing a lot of articles, that's understanding what makes them tick, it's understanding what makes them scary. And that is something that I don't think you can really rush. I think some people have, a better aptitude at that, just sort of clicking and saying, oh, wow, that's really powerful. And it's because of these really underlying fears, these underlying mechanics and things that are never spoken as such in the piece or in the comments. It's like, everybody's missing that this is actually scary because it plays on this very basic fear, rather than this more, detailed one that we actually elaborated on in the work. Having the ability to identify the core elements to it and then use that to sort of flip the format is something that there, it's not a ton of people on the wiki that can do that and pull it off to the tune of a high score. That said, we're about done. Next week 32 is going to be a lot of skips, I think. We'll see. Bear with me. I have a lot of reading to do between now and then. So, CollabCon recap, part 1, with any luck, going out on Tuesday to patrons. And I'll see you guys soon. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you on the other side.